We're now live on YouTube with the 2019 April 22nd meeting of the OpenJS Foundation Bootstrap team meeting. Tierney, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thanks, Miles. So thanks everyone for coming again. So just as a heads up for anyone who's just joined, if you could add yourself to the minutes doc, that would be awesome. Put the link in the chat if you've not already done so. But after that, we can get moved on to the agenda items. So first agenda item is voting CPC representatives from projects, issue 152. Looks like Jory opened this. Jory, do you want to give a quick status update on this?
Sure. So we've had a number of folks from the at-large and growth projects come forward. So I think we're at 5 nominees, and I'm actually expecting a couple more nominees from those those categories of projects to be coming in the next couple of days. On the impact side, I did reach out again on the jQuery, Dojo, and Webpack issues that I opened, just to poke them and remind them that there's a May 1st deadline to submit their representatives, and invite them to reach out and ask questions if they had any. I also kind of tried to reiterate that this is a requirement of the impact projects, and if it doesn't seem like something that they're going to want to or be able to have the time to support, then perhaps making a different election, stage election, might be appropriate. So hopefully in the next day or two, we'll start to hear back on those threads from either community members who want to fill that role, or hear back from them in terms of whether they want to change stages. So that's it right now. I think just kind of driving home that May 1st deadline is going to hopefully get a number of other either nominees or changes to the stage election.
Cool.
I think just to add to that, in terms of the TSC nominations, the issue was opened, and I'm just looking at it quickly now. I think only myself and Matteo volunteered. So I think the nominations were going to close today, so we should be able to come up with, and it was also tied to the TSC chair, so it may be that with 2 of us, there's just a natural, fit in terms of the roles. So we may be able to say sooner than later, but that should be well in hand for May 1st, hopefully. And I know on the ComCom side, it was also kicked off.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the ComCom side, I was talking to Adam before the meeting because he can't make it. On the ComCom side, the Node.js Community Committee side, it looked like we're following the same process roughly in terms of dates. There have been a few nominations, though that is closing today. Nominations are for ComCom members only, and that will be published, and then Adam will be doing the kind of creating the Q&A issues as per how we usually do these kind of elections in the ComCom today, I believe.
Yeah, so it's tight, but I'm sure if not May 1st, the week after, we'll have the Node representative, so that's good. The other thing related to that is last week, Nick and myself took an action to go and look at how we might elect the voting members for the non-impact representatives. And I've realized that I actually made this it's not a Google Doc, but if I share my screen, maybe actually I'm going to copy it into Google Doc while we speak. Okay, sorry, docs, because it would be worthwhile to go through and get some feedback from this group. There's some things which are kind of a bit tricky. So you should be able to see my screen now.
Yep.
Okay, so we got together, we spent an hour brainstorming. We said the process would start with an issue being open, the CPC repo announcing the period of nominations open. any member from the non-impact projects can self-nominate. So that was kind of the first thing we thought it would be best if any member from the impact projects can self-nominate as opposed to projects nominating the members, because that kind of comes up to almost being a vote in itself as well. So we figured, okay, start with self-nomination. When they nominate, they should provide a posting that says, you know, what projects they're part of, description of the background, why they would like to act as the non-impact CPC voting member, confirmation that they can devote the time and effort, and their employer. And that's specifically because there's rules in the CPC governance that says, you know, we can't have more than so many people from a particular employer. And so we need that in the voting process, or figuring out, you know, who's won. We may have to disqualify people from the voting from that if there's, you know, overweight in a particular employer. Nomination period for 2 weeks, at which point we'd not lock the issue. And then, you know, once the nomination period closes, we'd ask the projects confirm that the membership that the people have stated is, you know, the project actually sees them as members of the project, just as a sanity check.
Jory has her hand raised.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Jory.
Yeah, just wanted, when this is appropriate, my question pertains to that confirmation that a person can devote the required time and effort. One of the questions I'm getting is, you know, what do we estimate that required time and effort, you know, really to be? What I've been saying is that I think we're looking at, you know, 2 to 3 hours every other week, you know, an hour for a meeting and 2 and 3, and then like 1 or 2 hours for like follow-up / action items. But, you know, I want to make sure that that's accurate. And then further, if we're making this, you know, a confirmation, that we kind of work that in, we work that expectation in.
Yeah, that is a good question, what that number is. I'd kind of hope that the 2 to 3 hours is the lower end of what people could commit, but it's interesting to say, what do we think is reasonable, right?
Right. And, you know, some of the projects are, you know, this can fit easily into what they do, you know, and so their employer is happy to finance the time, but, you know, we may be looking at other people who don't have that. And so this is more of their weekend and free time. So just kind of making sure that we have a balance that
Yeah.
works for both.
Yeah, I don't know. Do people have ideas of what is a reasonable time? Like,
well, what sorts of things are people expected to do?
it's I mean, it's meant to be, if you look at, well, here, actually, the easiest answer is this. I'm just finding the CPC governance itself, because it lists out a whole bunch of things that the CPC is responsible for. Sorry, just navigating to that section. So I think this is not, well, yeah. Here, I'm pasting the link. Let me find the chat again. Where are we? I think more, okay. So this is the link to the governance. And then if you scroll down to, there's this section titled, the CPC is responsible for. So, you know, we see that as the responsibility of the overall CPC, which includes, you know, regular members, voting members, and observers. I think the expectation is, though, that the voting members will take a leadership and you know, have more of a stake in making sure things move forward and you know, these things get done.
Well, and I think certainly have, you know, the awareness of all of the different activities so that they're helping to guide the direction of the programs and things that we want to do in the future. So that does require, you know, maintaining kind of an active engagement.
Right. It's the, yeah, I think that's a very good way of phrasing it. You know, not necessarily doing all the work, but being up to speed enough to be able to help guide and, you know, make sure things are going in the right direction, or finding volunteers to help with things, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I guess even if some of the volunteers or some of the members feel like they don't have enough time to commit to that, they also have their own projects which they can get volunteers from, right? So I guess as long as it's clear that, you know, with that delegation ability, then maybe people won't be so worried about what the time commitment is, as long as they have like enough time to at least administer all those things, like you said.
Right. Yeah. If you exactly, like if they're bringing other people from the project and you know, helping to do the day-to-day work, that's definitely good.
One thing that I would throw out there, like I think one of the most important parts of people in these roles will be maintaining the context of everything. So while you may not need to be on the ground doing all of the actual work, it's a non-trivial amount of time making sure that you're on top of all the things that need to be done and making sure that it's getting done. And so that's where I think like a good chunk of that time will come from, is just maintaining context and making sure that, you know, decisions aren't being made in a vacuum, and there's a holistic vision of everything that's happening in the foundation.
Yeah, and it's not to underestimate the amount of effort to just keep on top of the. So I mean, like in the node repo, there's a lot of issues, and keeping on top of them is a significant amount of work on its own. Now, I don't think there'll be the same flow through the OpenJS, at least to start, but.
And to a certain extent, you can expect that the chair of the CPC probably does a lot of you know, of that work. But to kind of bring this back to we've gone slightly off topic because I think we want to also get back to the election process.
Yes. Yep.
You know, I just wanted to make sure that there's a pin in answering that question for potential nominees.
Yeah, I don't know if we should open an issue or whether we think we can just come up with a number that people may.
Also, just a quick question. With this particular role, given that there might be a bit more of a time commitment to keep the context of everything, should there be any type of criteria, I suppose, for background? You know, not like definitely not trying to open up a vetting conversation or anything like that. I'm just saying, like, maybe should there be a set of criteria, like the individual has a certain amount of hours a week, you know, dedicated or supported by their company, XYZ, versus being you know, a weekend or spare time thing.
I don't think we'd want to. My personal feeling is I don't think we'd want to exclude people based on that.
Yeah.
The main reason we bring this up is that it's like there are a bunch of ways to be involved, and you know, if it's just to try and, you know, there is a little higher expectation if you want to be a voting member versus the other members, so to just make that up front.
Right.
But I think it's, in my mind anyway, it's the commitment to be able to, like, you know, other people have been saying, be on top of things, or so when votes come, you know, you have the insight and you've been engaged enough to properly participate in those, right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thanks.
So I'm going to time box us here just because we have a few other issues. We spent 20 minutes on this one. And we can come back to this if we have time at the end. But I do want to move on just so we can make sure to get to all the issues. Just as a heads up, Michael, you're still screen sharing. But yeah, so the next issue is, let's see here, issue 130 in Bootstrap. I will paste the link here. It is create process for new projects and joining the foundation. This is created by Miles 28 days ago. So I assume that's 2 meetings ago, or 4 meetings ago, I guess. Miles, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, hello. So I started going through things and trying to look it up. I've got a pull request open right now, number 158. I will drop a link in there for a stage 0 proposal. I just went through and I took our current fill in the blank kind of template that we have for new proposals, and I augmented it to be for projects. Now, one thing that you'll notice if you take a look in there is that as I started going with it, it kind of seems like perhaps Jory's stage 1 project onboarding proposal and this proposal should perhaps be merged since there's a lot of overlap between the two. Jory, do you have any thoughts about that?
I think that's a good idea. I hadn't really spent just a ton of time thinking about it, but I think generally where we can consolidate, and that's a good idea, and I'm very happy to work with you on that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the thought process that I had there, if you take a look at I'll just drop a link in here, which is like the application. They're like basically the onboarding checklist would be kind of one of the categories in the application. And then the only other thing, I went through the CPC charter, and I don't think there's any changes we need to make to that unless we make a special kind of rule for people who are like observers from projects. But the larger change would be likely having to open a PR against the project progression markdown file, unless we want to make a specific file just for kind of like instructions on how people propose. So do people have kind of any thoughts or preference between that? Do you think that it should be its own standalone document for new projects, or should it be part of the existing project progression document?
It makes sense to me to be part of the project progression. It's just kind of the first stage, right?
Okay. So with that being said, kind of other hanging questions that I identified for right now. So it seems like we answered, should this merge with the project onboarding proposal? So I'll go ahead and I'll close the PR that I have. Well, I'll augment the PR that I have right now to update the existing project onboarding proposal. Jory, are you open to being co-champions on this with me?
Of course.
Okay, great. There's still the question about like whether or not there should be a quiet period. I think that there should be, and I'll work on documenting that. And then the last question would be, should all current projects be expected to go through this process? This kind of came up in the last meeting, but it feels to me that if we're going to make a checklist, if we're going to make some sort of expectation for new projects, it seems that we could maybe identify some of the bugs in the process early by dog fooding it ourselves. But further, that it's really only fair to projects that are coming through that we all go through this process ourselves. Is my personal opinion on it. Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I guess in my mind, it's going to come through like how much work is that? Some projects, from the existing didn't necessarily have an option, whereas any new project, it's like they're asking to join. So it's easier to say, okay, yes, and in return, you have to do these things, right? Versus an existing project that was running happily along. And now you say, please jump through these extra hoops. I don't know. Not saying it's unreasonable, but that's just one thing to think through.
Yeah, I think my thought process would be that like this application form should probably take no more than 15 or 20 minutes to fill out. It would identify who like the point of contact for a project is, and it would also ensure that they've gone through the checklist of all the things. If we have that checklist, and then that checklist, the projects within the foundation aren't checking all of those off, that seems like work that we should be following up on anyways. We shouldn't really be having expectations of new projects coming in that's above and beyond what we're willing to do as projects ourselves.
I definitely don't disagree with that, Miles, especially since I think a lot of how the foundation has been molded is to reflect the projects as they currently are, but also allow that to kind of perpetuate. So it shouldn't theoretically be too high of a barrier if for any of the projects, hopefully, if those expectations do not align with their current state of things. And if they do misalign, that is a good way for us to understand how the foundation might not be perfectly set up right now. And it's a chance for us to improve that to make sure that it is better set up. So I think that's a smart thing. A good approach. I guess, I mean, I don't think it'd take a lot of effort for an individual to go through that, and then they can take like a single person, like I could do that for Node, or you could, or Michael could, like any of us could do that for Node.
That's what I mean. As long as it comes down to something that's relatively easy, then I don't think it matters.
Yeah, and to be clear, I guess my thought process was, as we go through that checklist, if we find that there's a bunch of projects that are adhering to that checklist, that can just as easily be a reason to consider removing something from that checklist as it is creating more work for projects to align with it. So that's kind of one of the main reasons I wanted to go through that. I will go ahead and kind of document that as probably, part of the stage 2 or stage 3 process for that proposal. And I'll, hopefully have that documented for next week. I am traveling next Monday, so I may not be around on the call, but I will sync with Jory. Jory, are you going to be on the call next Monday?
Yep.
Great. So then Jory will be able to kind of handle any of that if I'm not on the call.
Sounds good to me.
Tierney, that's it for me, unless anyone has any thoughts or questions.
Okay, if nobody else has anything else they'd like to add, we can move on to issue 130 in Bootstrap. Close my tabs here. Okay, so this is, nope, that's the one we just went over. Issue 129. So this is review meeting times created by Michael. I believe there's also the spreadsheet created by Jory. In the last meeting, I know we discussed May 1st as kind of a deadline for when we need to be having this filled out, so we can just kind of have a date to know that we're done. It looks like there's, it looks like it's more filled out. If you have not filled this out already, there are more people in this meeting than have filled it out. So if you could please go fill it out, that would be stellar. I am going to put the link in the chat. Also, this applies to anyone who you think who wants to participate as a voting or a regular member. Is that the terminology, regular member?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So this also applies to them. This isn't just for people in this meeting. So if you are interested in participating in the CPC and attending, please, 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 please fill this out. This will help inform us what times would be best for us to meet so we can get the most people in possible. Additionally, it's worth noting that there are 2 sheets. Someone told me this, I didn't read the line at the bottom. There are 2 sheets there. There's Tuesday and Wednesday. Please fill both sheets out. That would be fantastic. Cool. Any other updates on that one?
Nope.
Cool. We can move on then. So that is issue 129. Cool. Next one is 115. This is steps to Bootstrap CPC and new foundation. Michael, do you have context on this as it stands right now?
Yep. So the next things on our list, still the common code of conduct in the OpenJS Foundation org. Actually, I guess that's my next. When we discussed it last week, I was looking for some more comments and okays to land. It does seem like we have quite a few. So it's really my next step to, I think either, I might propose landing that and then moving it. We were talking about opening an admin repo and then move it there once we get that opened. if that's okay with everybody, because it's got some PRs as opposed to starting from a fresh PR. The next thing was the new Zoom and YouTube, I think, which Brian was working on.
Yeah, so those are in place. Do we want to start using those for this meeting, or?
I would say yes.
Okay. All right, cool. So then I will make sure that the appropriate people get access, and we can take it from there.
Okay. Sounds good. Work with projects to identify initial CPIC representatives. We already talked about that, so I think that's well underway. Document define initial process for handling reports to report at openjs.org. So Manil had volunteered to take first cut at that. We should take a quick look in the repo to see if there is one. I'm just looking, sorry,
I
repository.
believe Manila is also on the call.
Okay, so Manil, have you had a chance to take a look at that? That's easier.
Hey, hang on. I'm just trying to pull it up. No, I hadn't made progress since then. Can we get another cycle on this unless someone else wants to accelerate it and jump on it sooner? But I think I can get it done by next meeting.
That makes sense to me. Okay, the next thing was create the admin repo and land initial government docs there. So we have an issue opened. I think somebody with access to the org probably needs to create the repo, right?
I think so. It also looks like on that issue, we were trying to make sure we were capturing some of the items we might want to move over from the Bootstrap repo. So that's another thing to just call out anything else we think we want to move to admin.
Yeah. So do we have a volunteer? I'm not sure. It's Jory, Miles, Tracy, who have access to create repos right now.
I'm happy to do that, or Miles can do that, or anybody.
I think multiple people can, because I have access and I don't think I'm in any special role.
Ah, okay. I assumed that it had to be one of the admins.
I'm a member, so no.
If it's mostly, I'm just coming back up to context, but if it's mostly just moving things around from the Bootstrap repo and creating that here, I wouldn't mind doing that.
Okay. So it's basically first starting by opening it, creating one, and then, yeah, we can look at what should be moved over. And there's a starting list there.
Okay.
One thing that I would request, when anyone makes any repo, please kick it off with the license in there. For myself and others from large organizations, I actually require the license being in there in order to be able to send any upstream pull requests or anything.
Great. If no one has a problem with it, I can assign myself to this.
And we probably need one of the things we should add to the admin repo as well is how you request to add a new repo, which is in the node project, we use something like, anybody can ask that one be created. It needs to be open for 72 hours or whatever it is. And then if nobody objects, the repo can be created.
Right.
Probably worth having a similar one.
Definitely.
So just a quick thought. Should we make a project board or something to track these action items that we're assigning to people?
We could do that. I've been just using this checklist as a way, but we could move over to a project board if somebody wants to create that.
If you have a list that I can convert into a project board, I'm happy to do that.
There's a list in this issue, Miles, that I'm linking, issue 115.
It's like a checklist of things that we're working on, so it should be a pretty straightforward.
Okay. Alternatively, if what we have going on right now is working, no need to introduce extra complexity.
Aired in last meeting. Okay.
For what it's worth, if we're using a project board, individual issues can be automated to move across boards. Just in case we're implementing that, it might be helpful to have individual ones for each item.
Yeah, you definitely need to create an issue for each one to do that, I'm sure. Cool. Okay, the next, so I've noted that Ben volunteered to create the admin repo and look at moving some things over. Add entry points for projects wanting to join on the README and review project progression. It says Jory mentioned she'd try and help with that one.
I did. I was actually looking for this action item for myself. I was like, I got an action item from last week and I couldn't figure out where it was documented, and then I found it a little too late, so I apologize. I should have written it down. So +1 to being assigned things on a project board, clearly.
Yeah, it is easier to find those, that's true. Draft initial process for voting members from the non-impact projects. So we talked a little bit about that, and if we had some time at the end, we can loop back. And I don't see any other comments about other things to add to the bootstrapping list.
Cool.
And I don't think, Miles, if you have time, I don't think moving this into a project board would be a bad thing, so.
I'm already in the process of doing it.
Okay, so yeah, so if you do that, that's great. I was gonna say, if you didn't have time, anyway, it's great if you're doing it, and we can start going through that list instead.
Cool. So does anyone else have other things they'd like to talk about? Any of the subtopics in this issue or this issue itself? Cool. I'll take the no as a no, or the no words as a no. Okay. With that, we have hit the end of our agenda, I believe.
Yeah, I'd like to loop back to the.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. So yeah, let's loop back to issue 152, which is voting CPC representatives from projects. I believe that was the one, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Non-impact projects. So yeah, I'm just going to.
Oh wait. Yes. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
This one. So we kind of got through a little bit of the discussion on the first one. We should figure out what we think the sort of, there's kind of like anyway, we should have I think a separate issue to discuss the time effort that we think. The election process we got to, and this is where we kind of, we talked about a bunch of different things. The challenge also always comes is that, our existing votes so far in terms of, members, TSC members, ComCom members, I'm sure other members within the OpenJSF projects have been more of a, we've got a group, let's choose, a person within that group to be the leader or to take on a certain role. In this case, it's a little bit more separate in that you have separate projects that may actually not interact too much. And so it's completely foreseeable that each project could put forward a candidate and just vote for those candidates, in which case you kind of come up with a stalemate. So we were trying to think of like, how do you avoid that? And we didn't come up with any great ways. So what we ended up with was, once the nomination period closes, we've confirmed the membership as we described before. Each project has 2 votes. The projects decide who will cast each of those votes on behalf of the project. So we'd still expect like an email, 2 emails from the project that we could use in one of the online voting systems, along with the guidance that we have in other places. And I think in the CPC governance included, we would use something along the lines of a single transferable vote. This is where, like, if there's too many people from a particular company, we might have the adjustment that a winner would be disqualified if it would push the number of voting members for a company over the 25% limit. And there was some text that somehow, I don't know if I just managed to delete that now, I guess, oops, maybe I didn't paste it, hold on. About that if there's a tie, that basically it would end up being a coin flip. But let me just see if I can find that, because I did a cut and paste and I probably didn't cut and paste it properly. Here we go. Right, so right, in the case of a tie, there'll be a flip of a coin or multiple flips if necessary between the number of winners. And at the end of the time, that's kind of the best we'd come up with. So we definitely wanted to bring it back to this group to see if there's additional ideas, thoughts on how, you know, you make that voting process work effectively. You know, we considered, well, what if there was 3 votes or 1 vote, or if you could only vote, one of your 2 votes could only go against somebody from your project. You know, that last one of the challenges is I don't think any of the voting systems are going to help us do that. So it'd be a bit of a challenge in terms of actually running the votes.
So the immediate thought that I have reading this is just that in my experience, like STV has been something that's been fairly complicated. Like, for example, it's famously implemented at the W3C, and it's caused maybe more consternation than it's been helpful, because it's really a system that works best for large numbers of votes. But we're talking about, you know, a relatively small, you know, group of people. And so my question is that really the best voting system?
Yeah, what other ones, like, it wasn't like we said, hey, that one's fantastic. It was kind of like, of the choices, this is the one that has been recommended across the project. So if you have an idea of something that you think would work well.
I mean, I wish I could say that I'm not an expert in these kinds of things by any means, but I just wanted to raise that, especially given that there's more than one kind of STV system.
Yep.
So, you know, it's worth looking at those and probably choosing the simplest, meaning one that we can implement by a human calculation, as opposed to using, like, you know, a computer or something to count.
Yeah, and I would just
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I would second that also, just based on the 3C experience. Like, I don't want to say I'm like -1 on STV, but yeah, it would need to be as simple as possible and very clearly explained, and there would need to be some effort in making sure people understand, because I think that's been part of the problem with W3C is people didn't really understand how it worked when they got into it, and then were really upset with the results.
Because the other thing we talked about was like that ideally we should probably only require people to vote once. If we relax that, it makes it slightly easier, potentially. Like if you had multiple rounds of voting.
Right, yeah. If you can do multiple rounds of voting, it solves that issue you said at the beginning, where you might have like 20 to 30 voters from projects that aren't familiar with each other, so they each vote for themselves. If you do 2 rounds of voting, where the first sort of brings it down to like even a quarter or a smaller portion of the original, then the second round of voting, you'll have much more informed, like people can't vote for themselves and they'll have to familiarize themselves with a few projects they may not have heard of, but at least then it's like, read about these 5 projects, do this.
Right.
So I apologize, my connection dropped. Thanks, Spectrum, in the middle of this conversation, but I just came back a little while ago. One of the things that we use for board votes and things like that at the Linux Foundation is Condorcet, which, I mean, it's a same vein of voting system as STV, but generally speaking, it's been reasonably well received. I don't know that we've run into issues with confusion on that particular one.
How does that one work?
So it's the way we typically do it, Cornell University has a website called Civs, which implements the Condorcet algorithm, which is not something that you do by hand. It's reasonably complicated, but essentially it's one vote where you rank your preferences, and then it gets analyzed. You know, everybody's vote gets analyzed at the end when all the votes have been received, and they attempt to come up with, you know, a rank of candidates based upon who prefers who, so that more people are happy versus less people. It's a very grossly simplified way of looking at it, but it has the advantage of not being manual.
Right.
And it's a single vote. One of the concerns about having a primary period and then the final general election is that you may not get as many people after they voted in the primary.
Right.
So just some food for thought.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, that was, we definitely thought, okay, if you require a bunch of rounds, then that's a challenge, right? So.
Yeah.
Most of our communities use Condorcet for the primary use case issue that you identified, which is everybody votes for their own project people, and then it would be just a stalemate. And so the next thing that happens is that somebody convinces somebody else to support them. And so, somebody wins by one. What Condorcet does is it requires everybody who's voting to rank order their preference, and then it does a calculation based on where each candidate shows up in the rank order of all the voters to determine the Condorcet winner. So
right, so you can
put
vote
the link
for
in the
your
chat.
own.
Want to take a look at it.
You can vote for your own.
You can still vote for your own project person first,
but then then you're the more consensus there is on the secondary ones. Okay.
For what it's worth, I believe we also used Civs twice, I think, in ComCom. The data entry is very manual, so that's just a heads up. That took me a lot of time, but
you mean so people don't get an email to vote, or?
No, I mean, well, there was a different tool that we used that had that problem, but I believe this one allows you to send an email.
It does. Yes. Yeah. You can have open and you can have closed votes.
Okay, so it'll send it for you.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Another one that might be worth looking at is Helios voting. It's what they used for the OSI elections. OSI did a slightly different process. I was trying to quickly find what the name of the voting model is, but I couldn't find it. But rather than a single transferable vote or the Condorcet method, basically you can vote for as many of the candidates that you want to approve as possible, and then it's kind of a stack ranking based on how many votes each candidate gets. So it's not single transferable. I actually found that particularly interesting as a model, especially for like large community votes, because then you can choose to vote, and only send a vote to the people from your group that you want to see go forward. But if, there's a handful of candidates that you support, you can, send votes for all of them. I guess this model may not make as much sense if we are trying to pick out one per group. But if we are just picking, two people from all of the different groups, this may be an interesting way to think about it, so that people, don't necessarily have to even pick one person to vote for. They could vote for every single person if they think they're all great.
You could also do a tiered version of that, where you do one for everyone and then pick top 3 or something like that, and then do it again.
I think that we're way better off taking off-the-shelf voting models or solutions.
Yeah, I think a tool that will help us is good.
Yep.
So the Helios is what? So basically, it's the main difference is you can vote for one or more people.
The Helios is a tool.
Okay.
And basically, they're using within Helios, instant runoff voting is the name of the process, which I just dropped in here. And I'll drop the link to how the OSI does it for their board. There's the link for it. And they use Helios as the tool for implementing this instant runoff ranked choice voting method. It's also known as transferable vote or preferential vote or alternative vote. The thing I liked about that voting process in particular was the fact that I could vote for as many candidates as I saw fit. And then it stack ranks all of them based on how many votes they've received. So that does, in my personal opinion, kind of solve the problem to an extent of, all the votes just go to my project. You can vote for as many of the candidates that you see as being fit for that role.
Yeah, I kind of like that one, Miles, because I think my biggest complaint with the STV-like systems is having to rank people. And if I equally would be happy with the number of people, I still have to put them in order.
Mm-hmm.
and so it makes it hard to vote like that when you don't necessarily want one person over the other. You would be happy with any of them.
Yeah, and I guess the flip side would be there'd be no way of saying, hey, I want this person more than another person. You kind of have to select everyone that you equally are okay with as representatives.
Right.
And I guess we could still get back to the stalemate where if everybody said, you know, to maximize my own project's representatives, I'm only going to vote for them, right?
Yeah, but I think that in any system that can be gamed. To me, it was more just like, I think the mental model of how I thought about voting when I was in that system was a lot better. Like, it urged me to think about this as more collaborative, more as a group, less competitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that, and I think that's probably what we should be going for.
Miles, does OSI let other groups use their Helios implementation to vote? I guess my concern with that one is
Helios voting is a verifiable online election. I don't think it's owned by OSI. It's just its own tool. So anyone can use it.
anyone can go in and set up their own election on their system. I didn't think that was the case, but
yes, I just signed in and can click create an election.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
Yeah, I just went through and created an election as well. Have to play with it a little bit to see about the model, but as far as I can tell, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Like, Helios is an open platform for creating verifiable elections.
Cool. Is there anything else we want to discuss around this?
I guess it's like, do we have consensus that we should start with one of the, you know, we had two good suggestions, I think. Do we have consensus to choose one over the other, or should we put them both into an issue to discuss further?
Should we set up a voting system to vote on the voting system?
Well, if everybody just says, you know, X sounds good, we'll just write up a PR that says that, right?
Well, here's the thought. Why don't we have a trivial vote that we set up in both systems and see which one we like better? So just maybe just come up with some, you know, bogus options here, but just have maybe everybody who's on the call, have everybody added as a voter, and we'll see what the experience is between the two. Which one?
I like that.
Best? Yeah, that's not bad.
So I would nominate Miles to come up with a poll for us. If you can come up with something maybe that we could ask in the questions. If Twitter's any experience, you're pretty good at that.
I'm in the process of setting one up right now.
Cool. So I think that can be our takeaways. Miles will create that. We're just coming toward the end here, so I want to make sure we're respecting people's time. Miles can create that and share that link. Do you want to do that in an issue, Miles, or do you think you can get it done before the meeting's over?
This is, yeah, they want me to make a CSV. This is going to take a minute.
Okay. So do you want to create an issue for that and do something about that?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, cool. So that'll be our takeaway for that. We will decide, I guess, based off that, which one people prefer, vocalizing that in the issue. And from there, I think we can kind of wrap that part of that discussion up. Does anyone else have things they'd like to add to that discussion or another discussion, and any other kind of heads up that we need to have before we wrap up the meeting?
Nothing to discuss, but maybe as a heads up for those who are interested, Brian Warner and I were chatting last week about the different pieces of infrastructure tooling that all of our projects use, and we're trying to come up with just sort of a bit of a survey to audit what we're using, and kind of looking for places to you know, consolidate if we're not really leveraging a tool particularly well, and you know, perhaps making a menu IT services then that we can make clear to prospective projects, the kinds of support that we have. And so I just want to make sure everybody has a heads up that we might be polling folks about what services they like using, and whether they're really getting a lot out of things, just as an FYI.
Sounds good. Also mention, I just did drop the link to that Google Doc into the issue that was open number 161. And Miles, if you have anything more in terms of the poll and stuff, it's probably good to follow up in there. And once we make the decision, Nick and I can put together a PR for an updated process.
Awesome. Cool. With that, if nobody else has anything,
I got one more thing. Small thing. I'm away the next 2 weeks, so I won't be here the next 2 meetings. Not because I'm not interested, just because I'm somewhere else.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you for letting us know, Michael.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, unless anyone has something else. Come on. I know you want to say something. No? Okay, cool. With that, then I think we can end the meeting 3 minutes early. So enjoy those 3 minutes. Go get a glass of water. But otherwise, have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.